Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming in today. I know it's early in Saudi Arabia and it's also lunchtime in the Philippines, but we appreciate that you took the time today to join us in our workshop. We have a very, very special guest today, and we are excited to share whatever he's prepared for us today. But before we start our workshop, we'd like to ask Teacher Alaville to share and maybe share something about Ukraine.
Okay, so I'll be sharing my screen. Good morning, everyone, and I hope that you will be prepared to really learn from our speaker today. And so from our email, we asked you to put your favorite place as your background if you have one. And this is the reason. So we just want to back up to one of the main reasons why we are doing these workshops. So it's a fundraising initiative that we have identified 3 beneficiaries, and the people in Ukraine is one of them. So I'll be playing this clip from our meeting with Teacher Ten.
Thank you so much for having the opportunity to help out the kids here as well in Ukraine. We're now talking about our favorite places because that's how I want to bring up Ukraine, actually. About places that we care about. Okay. Some of us, our favorite places. Some of you answered that your favorite place is home, right? Some of you answered it's the beach, and some of you answered that it's the mountains, the forests, right? And the thing is, my favorite place is Ukraine right now. But now my favorite place is in danger. So it's not safe to be in my favorite place. And it's not just for me, but it's also for the other kids. So for example, kids like Perrin who loves to stay with their families, they're not with their families anymore because they're separated. Some of them went to another country. Some of them stayed here. Some of them don't even have homes anymore. The beach, we cannot go there because in the beach there are some warships that can attack us, right? In the forests, we can't go also because there might be soldiers or mines in the forests. So what I'm trying to say here is that we all have our favorite place. We all have a place that we love, a place that we care about. And this is the place that I care about right now. This is my home. And it's very nice that all of you kids are trying to help save my home, because there are also kids like you, families like you, who are actually in danger of losing this home too.
Okay, so that was the message that we had. But we know that even though we have our favorite places, we are just in one earth, right? We're in the same world, and we want to do what we can in whatever space we are in, and also at the same time take care of others who might be in our sphere of influence or whoever we can reach out to. That's what we are supposed to do as humans, right? Take care of each other. So thank you so much for being here today, and we are grateful.
Good afternoon to our friends in the Philippines.
Great.
And good morning to our buddies in Saudi Arabia. I'm Philip, and with me is my best buddy, Sam, and we are here to welcome you to our workshop for today. Some reminders before we start. Be ready to learn. Stay muted unless called. If you want to speak, raise your virtual hand. Be kind in the chat. Turn on your camera. Prepare your Zoom background. Choose an image of your favorite place. Family-friendly images, please. Now I bet you're wondering, what is Workshops for Peace? Well, Workshops for Peace is an overseas Filipino homeschoolers fundraising initiative that aims to educate, empower, and engage students while at the same time fostering creativity, compassion, and collaboration. Our beneficiaries include Ukrainian refugees and frontliners through Filipino teacher currently residing in Kiev, Ukraine, Krysten Boado of Kaizen Alternative Learning, as well as the initiatives for helping Somalia led by Taylor Quinn, who works with the UN World Food Program, and our shelter building initiatives for typhoon or death victims in Tanagat Islands through Jordan Sebastian of Courageous Compassion. This event wouldn't be possible without the help of our speakers as well as our friends from Kidu Farm, Tailored Food, Innovation World, Courageous Compassion, Kaizen Alternative Learning, Prince of Peace Integrated School, and Penuel Integrated School, Christian Academy of Rizal.
Our first workshop was Inventing for Peace, where kids learned how they can tap into their creativity and start inventing. The next session was with teacher Krysten, and it was a cultural exchange meeting for students in Ukraine. The third session was Urban Farming for Kids, was a learning session about urban container gardening. Last week, we had Content Creation for Teens, a workshop that helped us to harness the power of social media. Today, we'll be learning about to start a non-profit. We're excited to learn more about non-profit organizations and how to collaborate and make a difference in our community. Taylor is a social entrepreneur obsessed with building nutritious, low-cost food systems, starting in Liberia and then in several other countries, including Somalia. He works with and supports many entrepreneurs through his own nonprofit, Tailored Food, and their role in leading entrepreneur support at the UN World Food Program. So without further ado, let's all welcome Taylor Quinn.
Thank you so much, Sam, and hi everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, great. And nice to see some familiar faces of some youth that I've spoken with before. So thank you all for joining. And so the purpose of today's workshop, I wanted to share a little bit about my own story as a young person, trying to start and get involved in nonprofit organizations, and talk about my experience working in the food system in particularly, in places like Somalia, and then turn it over to our participants to have a conversation about kind of going through the steps of a little bit of kind of what are the core questions to ask when you might be interested in starting your own nonprofit organization. So I'll share my screen over here. So just give me 1 second to do that. Great. Okay. Sorry about that. So to start, with maybe before we get started, I just wanted to do a quick icebreaker. So I'm curious, for those who are joining today, a quick question: what is your favorite food, and why do you think it's a really good food? And I'm happy to start. I'm actually eating one of my favorite foods right now, which are fresh dates. I'm having dessert because I'm in Canada, so it's evening for me. So I'm having a date that I put almond butter and cinnamon in for dessert. And dates are one of my favorite foods because they are a completely natural food, but have a really natural sweetness. And so they're really delicious and also quite nutritious as well. So they make a really nice dessert after dinner. But does anyone else want to share, what is one of your favorite foods and why is it your favorite?
My favorite food is actually shopao. It's really nice. It's practically like from, how do I explain? Like a dough, and then you put some asado in it side, or you can put any. You can also put ube and yeah, I like it.
Cool. Thanks for sharing, Sam. Does anyone else want to share what one of their favorite foods is? No worries. So we can, let me get started with my presentation, if that's okay. So first and foremost, I want to, just tell a quick story to make all this a little more human. So myself, I grew up in Canada, but at the age of 22 years old, I moved to Liberia in West Africa. And at the time, Liberia was going through the Ebola epidemic. So Ebola was a disease that was more contagious than COVID, and more deadly as well. So it was pretty scary. And it was, there's an outbreak of it in West Africa back in 2014, 2015. So I moved to Liberia during that time. And Didi, the woman pictured here, Didi and her family became my next door neighbor. And Didi and her family, they want to eat, good, healthy food. But her kids, her kids enjoy playing football in the street, and we would play ball and hang out. But healthy food was often really hard to find. And I moved to Liberia, and I was supposed to be doing one nonprofit project, but I tried to talk to as many people as possible. And eventually I met with a pediatrician, a doctor who focuses on children. And he explained to me that, that in short, because healthy food was not really affordable and was not accessible to families like Didi's, that kids were actually dying of starvation in Liberia. And despite the best efforts of different organizations who were trying to treat kids once they got sick, the fact that healthy food didn't exist in markets, it wasn't something families could easily access, meant that kids were dying of starvation. And him as a doctor, he could only do so much to help. But the problem was that, healthy food wasn't available to families like Didi. And this is the, kind of typical market stall in Liberia. So as you can see, lots of food is sold in Liberia. It's not that, people are starving because they have nothing to eat, but the foods that are available aren't very healthy. So you can see, things like Pringles, different biscuits, cornflakes, cookies, lots of food that, might be yummy, might taste good, but is really lacking in nutrition. And so I became really obsessed and with the problem of why is nutritious low-cost food not available for families like Didi's? And so my goal became, designing food systems that are really based on 4 core ideas. Food should always be nutritious, taste really good and be delicious, be affordable for families like Didi's, and be local as much as possible, using local crops, having local production systems, local packaging, as much as possible. And you can't just make good food, but what I quickly realized is that you also have to make good food exciting. And for those of you on the call, some of you I know participated in the K through 12 Healthy Food Challenge that we hosted in collaboration with Innovation World. And some of the teams here had really incredible ideas on how to make healthy food exciting and really interesting. And in places like Liberia, we designed a line of healthy porridge products made with crops like cassava and sesame seed and coconut. But then we marketed those food products with soccer matches or football matches, having brand ambassadors, music concerts, all those different types of things. And we've done a lot of good work at this point in a couple of different countries, such as Liberia and Congo, and are always working to continue to scale up. Nowadays, we work in countries like Mozambique, Somalia, which I'll talk about in a little bit, Brazil. I'm about to start working in Cambodia and Thailand, maybe hopefully the Philippines one day. as well. And here are some of the partners that I work with. As mentioned, I work with the UN World Food Program, and then many other nonprofits like the Gates Foundation, and different companies as well. And just to go straight to Somalia, of course, a lot of the headlines right now are really understandably focused on Ukraine, and what's going on in Ukraine is incredibly scary, and it's important that the headlines are focused there. But as many of you know already, despite a lot of the world's attention and support going to Ukraine, there's also a number of other challenges that other countries are facing, that are really at an emergency level. And Somalia is one of those places. So Somalia is a country in Northeast Africa that historically people are nomadic for the most part. So families will keep livestock, generally camels and goats and maybe cows, but they'll move around so that their animals can eat, and that's typically the lifestyle in Somalia. But there's been a really, really bad drought for the last 4 years, where the rains that are typical in the spring and the fall in Somalia, that replenish the forest, replenish the fields, all of that, the rains haven't come. And so Somalia has been experiencing what's called a drought, and that's led to a famine, where the price of food is really high. Families, are kind of selling off all their savings, all their possessions to try to buy food, and a lot of people in Somalia are dying of starvation from malnutrition. And so I got asked by the UN World Food Program to go to Somalia, and to map out the food system landscape, the challenges and the opportunities, to really, and I'll talk about this more in a minute, but really to first and foremost understand what are the problems facing the Somalia food system, and where are the opportunities to make it better. And then rather than starting new initiatives, where are the initiatives that maybe the UN can support, that are already happening on the ground, rather than starting everything from scratch. But anyways, yeah, so I spent 3 weeks in Somalia, and Somalia is also a real, has a challenging security landscape, especially right now. So, it's, if you're not Somali, if you're not from Somalia, it can be a little dangerous at times to move around in different communities, because there's a lot of military conflict that's happening between different groups in Somalia. But the work that I do, again, I move around in communities trying to identify what are the problems in the food system and where are the opportunities to make it better. So problem first, and then where are the opportunities is always how I try to think about starting new nonprofit projects. So some of the pictures here, I really like this one goat that had his head stuck in a watermelon and was eating a watermelon. But I spend time with women, and this is a grandmother who cares for 5 children, and runs a small shop out of her house where she sells tomatoes and onions, but doesn't have a lot of money for food. And then here are some of the spices on the right that Somali people buy to add in and make Somali tea. And Somali tea is one of the main staples of the diet. People drink a lot of tea there. And here's a dad who had 4 kids, and was unemployed and living in a refugee camp. Him and his family, they had to leave their home. So Somalia has hundreds of thousands of families like this who have had to leave their home, leave their businesses, leave their schools, leave their friends behind because of 2 reasons. Because of either and they're fleeing dangerous regions, where there's military activities happening, and fighting, and it's quite dangerous, or they're fleeing because the rains have stopped coming to their region of the country, and therefore there's no water, so they're moving to areas where maybe they think they can get more water. And so this picture is from a community where there was a river running through it, and so a lot of refugees had come to that area. But at the time I was there, the river had actually just gone dry. So a bit scary. And all this being said, for me, this is a picture of me holding up a sign when I was in high school. Actually, I was 16 years old in this picture, and I since I was in high school, have always been passionate about trying to, do social justice work. The problems I'm trying to solve in my work have kind of evolved over the years, and now are very focused on the food system. And what I'm trying to do now in Somalia with the UN is to develop a better system that is better set up, when the weather changes, to make sure that people have healthy food all year long, even if the rains come or they don't come, and making sure families have enough money to be able to buy food that they need to grow strong and that tastes good and that's culturally relevant. And so that's a little bit about my work. Before I talk a little bit about kind of the steps of starting a nonprofit, does anyone have any questions about tailored food and what we do? And thank you, Preston, for posting in the chat. I agree, Greek salad is delicious, with the combination of the saltiness with the crunchy freshness of vegetables. But does anyone have any questions or comments about tailored food and what we do?
I'm curious to know if you are able to run it completely offline, or do you have an office somewhere?
Yeah, good question. So I do not yet have an office. We're not quite big enough. So I have, myself, I work full time. And then I have one part-time employee who's a mom of a couple young children, and she lives in France. And then I have a number of volunteers who work with tailored food, and so they're mostly university students, and they're in Canada and the U.S. as well as sometimes in Asia and the Middle East as well. So we're kind of a little bit spread out. And then so tailored food works with local entrepreneurs in a number of countries. So our entrepreneur partners, they have offices, but we try to keep our cost as low as possible, because I get grants and donations from different sources, and then I try to redirect that money to the entrepreneurs on the ground. So to KV Foods in Cameroon, or to the Mozambique School Lunch Initiative in Mozambique, or to Kawada Farms in Liberia, or to my UN project in Somalia. So we act as a bit of a go-between, so we try to keep our cost as low as possible. And I just, generally speaking, work from home.
Thank you. And also, is there ways for students to get involved with tailored food?
Yeah, good question. And I'm just going to put the Tailored Food website in the chat for those who are interested in learning more. And I'll maybe put my email as well. But yeah, as I mentioned, we have a lot of university students who do volunteering with us and help us on our projects, doing research, doing project management, doing fundraising, doing partnership development, all sorts of different areas. But we would also definitely be open to younger students, younger people in general getting involved. We don't want to discriminate based on ages, and we can develop. I think one of the things that I want to really emphasize is that for myself, when I was young, when I was in elementary school or high school, I had a lot of really great tangible volunteering opportunities that gave me a lot of good skills that allow me to do what I do today. So as much as we can, one of our priorities is trying to create valuable learning opportunities for young people so they can get tangible experience of working in the nonprofit world, so that one day they can either get a job working for a nonprofit or maybe start their own nonprofit. So if you're interested in getting involved, please feel free to follow up with me directly or with the event organizers, and we can coordinate. Did I see another hand that was raised?
Yes, Annika wants to ask you a question.
Yeah,
Annika?
for sure.
Are you working with UN?
Yeah, so good question, Annika. So I work with the UN. I spent most of the last 1 year at the UN food headquarters, which is in Rome, Italy. So I set up a new program for the UN World Food Program, their headquarters. I set up a new department there focused on working with local businesses. And so I worked with the UN full-time. Now my nonprofit organization, we work with the UN, but I'm kind of more on specific projects. So I was an employee of the UN, now I'm a partner of the UN. So we collaborate on specific projects, yeah. So I'm following the UN response, and I have many friends who are working with the UN, in Ukraine right now, in Afghanistan, working on the different emergencies that are happening around food. Yeah, Preston, that's a really good question in the chat. How do you explain food systems for people who don't know what it is? Food systems is a very popular term right now. And I would explain it as a food system, or food systems are all the different components that go into the food that we eat every day. So a food system is all the components. It's the farmers, the truck drivers, the warehouse workers, the grocery stores, the shopkeepers, the market entrepreneurs who are maybe selling fresh fruit in a market. It's all those different aspects make up the food system. And for a food system to work well, all those different pieces, all those different people need to work together really well, right? And so sometimes food systems, for example, right now with the Ukraine crisis, one aspect of the food system, the supply of crops like wheat and sunflower oil, a lot of that comes from Ukraine and comes from Russia. So that aspect of the food system has been disrupted. So there's not as much wheat and sunflower oil coming into the world's food system. And so prices are really high for food around the world right now, which is a big challenge. So yeah, food system, all the different people who make up the web that's needed to get food on your plate, on my plate, each and every day. Because it's pretty amazing when you look down at a bowl of rice, or at my date I'm having for dessert, or a cup of tea, and you think how many different people had to work together to get that cup of tea to you or to me, right? The people growing the actual tea leaves, the people doing the packaging, the truck drivers driving the tea leaves to the factory. It's pretty amazing how complex it is, and how many different moving parts there are when you really think about it. Yeah, so what do we actually sell, Arsen? Thanks for the question. So Tailored Food supports local businesses that sell different foods we sell whatever food is culturally relevant. So in Mozambique, we sell a low-cost peanut butter. In Congo, we sell like protein bars, like snack bars made from cassava and packaged in banana leaf. In Liberia, we sell tasty porridge. In Somalia, we're going to be selling a few different things, but actually focused on tea, healthy tea. In Brazil, we sell kind of soy plant-based meat. So we often use vegetables as ingredients, but our final products are whatever foods are culturally relevant. And maybe to move into the second part of the presentation, if that's okay. And thanks for everyone for all the really good questions. But wanted to talk today, the purpose of the workshop is really around, you know, how and when do you start a nonprofit organization? So I've been pretty lucky to have been involved in starting a couple of different nonprofit organizations over the years. And including when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I worked on setting up a nonprofit organization. So I've been doing this type of thing for quite some time. And the first question is, what social problem do I care about? So, you know, for each and every one of you, you know, what do you see happening in your community that you find frustrating? Or maybe is there a global issue that really, you know, you find interesting and that makes you really curious and ask more questions about? And then, you know, importantly, what topics get you really excited when you talk about them? You know, when you talk about food, does that make you excited? When you talk about healthcare, when you talk about education and that everyone should be able to go to school, you know, what are the topics that get you really excited? So that's the first question, and we'll kind of come back to that in a second. But the second question, and I think I want to highlight this number 2 here, I think it's the most important one, is that often starting your own nonprofit is actually not the best way to make impact. You know, many times I've wanted to, you know, start working on something, and I've realized maybe there's other really good organizations that are already working on the problem that I care about. And it's been the more effective approach to support those existing organizations. So, you know, for example, you know, tailored food exists and fills, you know, a need in the market. But, you know, I also recognize that it was important to work with the UN. You know, they're a really big organization and they have a really big impact. So I thought, you know, the UN is a different organization that I can join to work to solve the problem. Not only always starting your own organization. That's not always the best approach. And then the third kind of step in this process. So first, again, you know, what social problem do you care about? You know, number 2, is there other organizations you can join and support and give money to, or give your time and your energy to? And number 3, if there isn't other organizations that are passionate about your specific issue, could you create your own organization? And the answer is, no matter how old you are, the answer is yes. And, you know, I'm willing to help, and there's lots of great resources out there that are willing to help. But, you know, if you're interested in taking a social problem you're passionate about and turning it into, you know, your own organization, here are some of the initial questions that I would recommend asking, either using a computer or a piece of paper, writing down, you know, why would your organization exist? What would your purpose be? What problem are you focused on? And what activities will you do to try to help? So is your organization going to be focus maybe on the issue of recycling in your community. Okay, maybe your activity could be putting up posters, making and putting up posters around your community, encouraging people that they should recycle, for example, or whatever it might be. So these are the kind of the 3 steps that I recommend, as you think about, thinking about starting your own nonprofit. What social problem do you care about? Is there another organization I can support that's addressing that social problem? And if not, how can I actually create my own organization to solve a social problem? Okay. Yeah, so altogether, I'm curious for each of you. It's really cool, this workshop. We have people coming from all sorts of different communities in different places in the world. So my question is, what is a problem that's facing the food system in your world, whether that world is in your house, in your local community, in your neighborhood, in your town, in your country, or the world at large. So again, the food system, is all the different people involved in making food. But yeah, do you know of any problems that are facing the food system that you're aware of? Yeah, so definitely feel free to unmute yourself.
Okay, can I start?
Yeah.
Yes, so we are here in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and it's actually just the holidays right now. Ramadan has ended and it's Eid vacation. So one of the noticeable things that you can find here is actually not food shortage, but a lot of food waste. So I think that's the main problem. How do you also deal with that, understanding that it's also a cultural thing? It's part of their tradition to celebrate. And so, yeah, that's what I can share for now.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, so the issue of during times of celebration, which is really exciting, but how do you ensure food is not wasted? And food, good food that totally people can still eat, is maybe going in the garbage. And how could that food be repurposed for different uses? That's a good one. Yeah, go ahead, Perrin.
I suppose another problem here might be that since we're living in the desert, it's harder to just grow vegetables in the blazing heat. So you won't be able to find giant community gardens full of tomatoes. So I suppose that maybe another reason why people are eating more at fast food restaurants, because it's harder for they themselves to actually grow their own tomatoes if they want to in large amounts.
Okay, you asked me about the food system in our world. I'm living here in Antipolo City, and whenever that people will go to the grocery supermarkets, you will realize that even though there are pandemic, there's a war happening in other part of the world, and the price of the commodities is very high. You can see that there are still people who can afford such thing if you are in the city. But that is what I mean. But if you are only in your community, you can feel it, the high price of the commodity. Sometimes even if you want to buy in the nearby store, you will not be able to buy one because they keep saying the prices are too high for us to accommodate. So that is what is happening here in our place right now. Thank you.
So three important ideas suggested, and Preston, to your idea, the challenge of growing food in hot, very dry climates is one that I saw firsthand in Somalia, and it's leading to a lot of major issues and a lot of people suffering because of it. And yes, in Saudi Arabia and other parts of the Middle East as well, there's big challenges there around how do you grow, fresh fruits and vegetables in a way that can still be affordable, in challenging growing conditions. So, we have 3 ideas here. I posted them in the chat. Food waste during, times of celebration, growing food in hot climates, and then the high prices for basic foods during times like this when the food system is disrupted because of the Ukraine conflict. So does anyone have, so these are 3 different problems, right? Problem number 1, food waste. Problem number 2, growing food in hot climates. Problem number 3, high prices. So does anyone have any? Yeah, go ahead.
I suppose a problem in today's world might be that countries might not be seeing enough of the need to invest in ways that entire communities can get together and try to grow their own vegetables. If you know what I mean, like it feels maybe a problem is that all these countries are focusing more on like tourism and having these new fast food chains, but we're not actually really seeing the importance enough. They're not seeing enough importance to really invest in initiatives that will allow people to get educated in growing crops and grow their own natural organic crops. And yeah.
Yeah. I figured out there's also a problem with how farmers farm. So like when they farm, uh, sometimes they can't sell it all, so they throw some or all in like the roads, like the cliffs or something. It's pretty sad and a very bad waste.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Sam, because when, at least me, when I used to hear about, when I would see on the news that oh, people were starving in a certain place, or kids were going to bed hungry, you'd think, oh, the problem is that like there's not enough food being grown, right? But to your point, Sam, what's often happens is that, again, the food system is just a little broken. There's farmers growing lots of good foods, but yeah, maybe the price is too low, or they don't have the right transportation to get what they're growing to a market. Different problems in the system, so that you can't only look at one aspect of the system. And I think that's why I like using the language of food systems, because you have to see all the different pieces. They all really work together, rather than just saying, hey, if we just give more money to farmers to grow more, then the problem will be solved. Well, if you have farmers growing things, but you don't have truck drivers to bring the crops, when they're fresh, to the big cities where all the people are, then that can be a challenge. Great. So we have 5 different ideas listed here in the chat. Food waste, growing food in hot climates, high prices for core food items, lack of investment in healthy food production over development of things like fast food chains at the country level, and then farmers struggling to find customers, and wasting their crops in places like the Philippines. So these are 5 different problems. I'm curious, as you look at these 5 problems, does anyone have any thoughts on any potential opportunities that they see in these 5 topics? What are some opportunities for activities that could help, with any of these problems? which I know these are 5 very complicated problems. So it's a hard question, but where are some of the opportunities to work on any of these 5 issues?
Well, I suppose one might be to educate an initiative to educate people on how to deal with the hot climates that, or more specifically, the extreme climates, because this also could apply to those who are living in cold places. So sometimes all you need to know is the knowledge of how to deal with it on under certain crop rotations, to use. So I think the first step before we try to figure out uh, new technology or a new kind of dome that's easily deployable, the first step I think is to educate the people.
Yeah, thanks, Perrin. Um, yeah, your idea, yeah, is to educate people, because to your point, Perrin, there's a lot of really good solutions, both in terms of equipment and different ideas on how to grow food in extreme climates, whether with greenhouses or with other forms of equipment, right? So educating people on these different forms of equipment and how to grow, that's a good one. Yeah, Sam, go ahead.
I had this app idea about an app that you can, so farmers can connect to their customers directly to the people that they want to sell their crops to. Like, for example, they have some tomatoes and this guy wants tomatoes. You can see in that app, like how you can sell it now. You can sell it easier.
Yeah. Great idea, Sam. You're right. This is a topic that lots of people have spent a lot of money, including the UN, on trying to solve this challenge of how do you better connect farmers to their end customers, and yeah, good whether an app or some other solution to provide that connection is a really great idea. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on any opportunities they see in these 5 areas?
I think one opportunity for the food waste during the celebration, maybe we can, in getting the food, we should get enough food so for what we need to eat. Or another one is for the waste, maybe we can give it to the dogs so they can also eat food for the pets, or not just for that, but so that we can not just buy food, um food treats for dogs, because they may have high price. And maybe another one is for fertilizers for plants.
Yeah, thank you, Anika. Those are all great ideas. Yeah, either collecting food waste and repurposing it for pets who need food, turning it, composting and turning it into fertilizer. Those are all really good ideas. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, MC, go ahead.
As you can see, we're talking about the food waste, right? Well, those wasted food, we can turn it into, what do you call this, for the crops, to fertilizers to those who are decaying foods. We can turn it to fertilizers, and we can plant more plants and grow plants much more faster. And every food that is waste, we can turn it into fertilizer, or we can plant more, and we don't need to problem about the food anymore. And for those that struggling to find some customers, well, they can just sell it to their nearby villages, or they can just use it to feed their families.
So I believe that Aliyah has a suggestion as well.
There's also urban farming where it can also, I heard that it can also strengthen communities, as it can bring people together and growing their own food, and that it can also help with food security since there are more people being born into this world and we don't have a second earth for more space.
Yeah, urban farming is, yeah, it's a really, exciting opportunity, especially, a lot of the work I do is focused on, it's maybe easier to think about, a community growing their own food in a rural area, right, where there's a lot more space and maybe not as many people. But when you look at, big urban cities where there's a lot of people and not a lot of space, how do you potentially look at solutions to grow food in more limited space? A place that does this really, really well is Cuba, and cities like Havana, Cuba. They grow food in almost kind of like every spare space. So on rooftops and backyards, in community parks, food is being grown for the community, which is really quite cool. Okay, so we have 4 opportunities down here. Does anyone have any others they'd like to share?
I still see I see Preston raising his hand. He raised his hand.
Go ahead.
So about I think problem number 4, the lack of investment in healthy food production over development of fast foods. That one's really I guess you could say a problem on the economic side of it, because the only reason why there's lack of investment is not because people don't want to invest in healthy foods, but more of the supply and demand, or the actual supply and demand of the market, and that there's more demand for I guess you can say tastier options and faster options and more widely available options, like the fast food like McDonald's, Pringles, chips, and all those junk. Whereas there's not as much demand for the fresh grown crops, and because of that, the prices are raised, and so the people who actually need those crops in their lives, which are the people in Somalia, can't afford those crops as much anymore, if if that's how it is. And so I guess one way to solve that is to spread awareness that when we choose our own diet, we're not only affecting our bodies in an unhealthy way, but in, like, I guess from a macro perspective, we're also like affecting other people who need, what do you call this, the other category of food, which is like healthy food, who are the people in Somalia. So that's what I saw from this problem.
I'm pretty sure you can also grow your own crops, and you can share some to your neighbors, or you can let the worms eat the skin of the vegetable, so that their manure can be used for planting for the fertilizer.
Yeah, thanks, Arson. That's a great point. Yeah, home gardens, growing food, even if you just have a balcony or a small area, and using, your own compost, your own food waste to try to, create worms and things like that is a pretty simple but effective way to help, increase the supply of healthy, tasty foods. So good point.
So I can share regarding the organic fertilizer. Okay, here in the Philippines, we made a organic fertilizer in the backyard. Then after that, those organic fertilizer made by the waste, so we can share it to our neighbors, even to the Filipino people here in the Philippines. So at least we cannot buy any more fertilizer.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for sharing. We had a lot of different voices that shared. So thanks everyone. And so just to summarize, we identified 5 different problems facing the food system today in our communities and our countries. And then we discussed 7 different opportunities to work on some of those problems were identified. And so for me, and we don't have time for all of this today, but I'd be happy to continue this conversation, with anyone who's interested, if any of these opportunities that are listed in the chat, if any of these, you find exciting or interesting, I would then, my next step to start a nonprofit would be to look up and see, is there organizations already, doing the work of building apps to connect farmers to end customers? Or is there organizations that are promoting and supporting communities and doing urban farming? Or is there organizations that are working to change the demand from fast food to healthy food? And can we support those organizations that are already doing really good work? And then if we did a little bit of research and we saw, hey, there's an opportunity here that's in my list that I'm excited about, and there's not really any organizations that are already doing really good work on this problem, well then, hey, maybe that's the opportunity for you to start your own nonprofit organization. If you find that there's kind of a gap and that no one is really working on the opportunity that you think is a really good idea. But first step, try to work with others because you're going to be more effective. And then second step, if others aren't working on something, then really think hard and think about starting your own nonprofit organization. So that would be the process. This is the process I went through, honestly, many years ago when I first became passionate about food and I first learned about the problems facing people in places like Liberia and Somalia. I thought, okay, is there other organizations I can support? And then only when there wasn't really too many organizations focused on this exact topic did I say, okay, it's time to start tailored food. It's time to start my own organization. So that's the process that I would go through. So maybe in the follow-up we could share these 7 opportunities that you all suggested, and as a bit of homework, maybe look up what is there organizations in your community or in your country that are working on any of these areas that you could get involved with directly, because these are all really tangible, impactful things that you could work on. It's a bit harder, when we're talking about food systems at a very high level, but urban farming or composting, or connecting farmers to customers, educating people on how to grow food in urban areas. These are all very real, tangible ways to impact the food system today.
So may I suggest, okay,
yeah.
Here in the Philippines, if there's no vacant areas, we use different kinds of materials like the bottle of water, the big bottle of water, so we can use that for our root crops in planting. For example, the eggplant, we can use that, and also in making an organic fertilizer in the small or the big bottle of water, even in a big box, we can use that. Then after that, we can use those organic fertilizer in every pot with a plants, like also eggplant, then the tomato, and also a chili. So we can share that to our neighborhood, even in other countries, to share those things if there's no vacant lot in other area. So at least those farmers, we can use that also in their area, even in their house, to use those materials. Thanks po.
Thanks for sharing. That's a great, kind of step-by-step guide on how to, do something like that, kind of in your own community. And yeah, so if you see that there's, no existing nonprofits that are working on the issue that you care about, and that you think it's, there might be an opportunity to start your own nonprofit, I would go back to the slide I shared of, asking, kind of 3 core questions. And first, either again on a piece of paper or on a computer, asking the questions of, kind of why would your nonprofit exist? What is the purpose? What is the problem you're trying to solve? Because as we've seen, there's kind of different problems, right? So really being clear on why you exist, what problem you're trying to solve, and then what are the activities that your organization is going to do to try to work on that problem. Are you going to be educating people? Are you going to be actually doing farming yourself? Are you going to be building an app? And once you have those 3 things identified, then you can turn those, kind of turn that information into, a more formal plan, maybe a presentation, whatever kind of is best for you. And then go through the registration process if you want to register your nonprofit in your countries, so that you can collect donations. There's, a lot of additional steps, but I think the biggest thing is, really being clear, first and foremost, why do you exist? What problem are you trying to solve? And what are your activities going to be? That would be kind of the first step. And then, if you get through that and you're still excited, feel free to give me a call or send me an email, and I can, support you in kind of actually kind of formalizing and taking your nonprofit and making it real. But really articulating those things is kind of more important than kind of the administrative tasks of registering a nonprofit and things like that. It's really important to get that clarity first and foremost.
What would you say one trait that you think would be needed for starting this kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. Honestly, patience, I think, would be the biggest trait that I would say, because to do this type of work, yes, I have a lot of energy every day and I get excited about it, but it can take time and it can be hard. And, a lot of people can tell you you're not going to be successful. And so really having the patience and knowing, having the faith that you're following the right path and you're doing the right thing, and that, you're going to have results, but the results don't necessarily come quickly always, right? When you're working on complicated problems, the results will take time. So patience, I think, is the trait I've valued the most as I've been doing this work now for about 6 years.
Maybe one
Very
last
good
question.
Yeah.
I just want to ask you, what has been the most rewarding part of this work that you do?
Honestly, for me, for the last now 6 years, no day do I wake up feeling like I have a job. For me, this is really just, a project that I love doing. It doesn't, feel, I don't get tired from it. It really gives me a lot of energy. And so, of course, actually connecting with people, sitting with a family in Somalia and working to try to make food better for that family is really rewarding. But I think personally, more than anything else, it's that every day I get to wake up and follow my passion, and that I'm able to make enough money to continue to do that. I think something I didn't know when I was a kid was that I believed you either had to volunteer and then you had to have a job. But those were kind of separate things. You like volunteered and did good, contributed to the community, but then you had a job. And those were like separate areas of your life, right? But the reality is that there's all sorts of jobs where you can actually make money and do good at the same time. And I think, trying to find those opportunities where those two things overlap, where you can, make enough money to support yourself, but then also do good. That's something I really value, and has allowed me to keep my energy levels high over the years of doing this work.
That is truly amazing. Thank you for sharing.
I
For
have
sure.
one more question. May we know what you need in your company? I am from Isabela and we have a lot of crops like yellow corn, cassava, banana, pineapples. Or we can teach people what high valued crops.
Yeah, good question. So we use things like banana and cassava, corn sometimes too. So yeah, all of those things are things we utilize. We always try to look at what crops are grown locally, that are already, that grow really well in the climate of wherever we're working, and then how can we use those crops. But a lot of those things you mentioned are definitely things that we've developed foods with some of our different partners.
Can we apply to be your supplier?
Yes, definitely you can apply to be my supplier, for sure. Yeah, because, again, as we were talking about, right, a food system is made up of so many different people, so many different stages of the process. So, a big part of what we do is sourcing crops from different suppliers, whether those are organizations or individual farmers, depending on where we are. So definitely would be happy to talk after.
Thank you for sharing. I agree that clarity of purpose is first and foremost. It does take a lot of research and brainstorming, and it could still change. And we appreciate your time. And we need your feedback. We want to know if you enjoyed this session and if you would like to learn something else in the future. Let us know by typing this link in your browser. Learn more about Tailored Food by visiting their website at tailoredfood.org. And we'd like to thank you all once again for supporting this initiative. We know that there are always a lot of people in need in different parts of the world. We chose these 3 beneficiaries because we know and have met the people who are directly involved in initiatives that are helping those in need in these locations. Suffering may come from both man-made and natural disasters, and most of these are beyond our control. But what we can control is our response. Thank you for choosing to respond with compassion. We'll be sharing updates in Ukraine, Somalia, and the Dinagat Islands in our Facebook group, so please check that out, and if you're interested to know more. And now it's time for a Zoom group photo.
Thank you everyone for coming to our final workshop. It is really amazing having this journey with you, especially for all the new faces we've seen, and also Lael, who I saw was here since like the beginning of our workshops for peace. So thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you also. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.